All right, Andrew Easton with the ESUCC here, and I'm really grateful to Jane Davis of Hershey Public Schools and Jim Whitfield of Minden Public Schools for joining us as we're going to have a conversation about setting a remote learning instructional schedule. There's a lot that goes into this. I mean, you're going to carry things over kind of one-to-one from what it would be like during normal times whenever you think about logging on during the day. For what duration of time, for example, are you going to have your students stay on? And I'm sure that there's some variance between K and 12 when it comes to that. And so a big topic that we're not going to be able to address in full in our 5 to 10 minutes here, but hopefully some practical ideas for you from people who have gone through this work. And so really grateful to both Jane and Jim for your insights. And so we'll start with Jane, I guess. Jane, what would you say as you were approaching setting a schedule? What was your thought process?
Well, our thought process was that we needed to keep K2 kind of between 1.5 to 2.5 hours of online. Grades 3 through 6 needed to be have its schedule of maybe 2.5 3 hours, and then 7-12 was its own. So we created 3 different schedules. And some of the things that we did with our schedules, for instance, the elementary, I'm going to talk about elementary to begin with, started the day out with just a little bit of social calendar time on Zoom, and then just a little bit of a break, and then have kind of short digestible standards, whether it's reading or math. There'll be a schedule that says which one is on what particular day. And then just some time for the student to not be looking at the screen, but be working on their assignments. I feel it's also important to have a wrap up at the end of a day so that the teacher can kind of wrap up with the students on a live Zoom. Also, all of these Zooms should be recorded because you are going to have some elementary students that are going to access it in the evening because of parents' work schedules. So it's important to record the Zoom or to have your recording in your learning management system so that parents can see it. The other thing we noticed that it was important to stagger those Zooms because parents at home, if they have 2 or 3 kids, their bandwidth isn't very good for all of them to be on at once. So, K1 should maybe be at a certain time, 2, 3 at a certain time, just to kind of stagger that. So that was some parent info feedback that we got.
Gosh, those are some really great ideas. And I love in there too, you're talking about things like having to chunk your curriculum, your content, right? And trying to really pare that down into manageable goals over the duration of time that you have there. Check for understanding piece. I love that we're recording some of those videos, and I know Dorian Avey at the Department of Education would be on my case if I didn't mention we don't want to have students in the recording, but you make the recording so long as you don't have those kiddos in there.
Right.
And I do really appreciate, as a parent myself, that thought of having that stagger, and I think that even helps from a parent support standpoint. Not only in what we can hold with connectivity and just the bandwidth, but also not having 3 or 4 lessons starting simultaneously, and you're trying to make sure all your kiddos are on at the same time. Jim, from what Jane shared there, how much that resonates with you in your process, and what was maybe a little different in your experience?
Well, honestly, a lot of it was pretty similar. We used Launch in Nebraska and some of the resources that they had about appropriate instructional time for kids, K3, 4-8, and 9-12, and really that was our big thing. Was we did have three schedules also in that setting, and a lot of it for us, we cover about 311 square miles of space, and some of those are fairly remote. And so we had another challenge that we recognized last March of getting adequate internet out to people, whether that was via hotspots that we purchased for our students or areas, or going out to providers to do a lot of those things. And so we get a lot of feedback from our teachers and our parents on what worked for them and maybe what didn't. And not everything that we could fix, because obviously there's a variance of dynamics when it comes to households. But we felt like if we can duplicate our schedule like how it is right now to the best of our ability and give the kids everything that they need or would have in a typical day. That's kind of how we functioned. And so we looked at basically our essential standards, the things that we have to get done during these times, but also looking at those that maybe are not as standard based, even though there's standards for everybody, but it's a little bit different when it comes to like PE, maybe music and some of those things. And so how can we incorporate those things into the schedule too? And so we've done some upfront work on recording videos and putting things out to where if we do have to go into a remote setting, that we can give these kids every opportunity, regardless of what the subject area is. So I don't know. I feel like we've obviously learned a ton from last March, and the process that I think everybody is going through is all dependent on their region, their community, and what they're having to, what constraints they might have. I guess when it comes to just trying to access different things. And I think the other thing too is that we learned that we needed a similar model across the board when it came to a learning management system, and having that set in place so that parents, regardless of what grade their kids are in, they have the opportunity and also the knowledge to be able to access those things without having to go around to a bunch of other sites or other things that they would just have to learn because they have a kid in the elementary, middle school, and the high school, which does happen to a lot of our parents.
Yeah, and so I'm kind of hearing that same comment echoed from, or an echo of that same comment from Jane, in that we can't always assume that students are going to be able to make their synchronous time, and if not, then having those video pieces or having an LMS where you can house some of those resources that students might be able to access later is really important, and a big part of being able to think through some of that remote learning instructional schedule. And so many factors weighing into that, but really appreciate the time that both of you have given us some ideas about what we should think about as we're getting started with this. I'll even throw it in here because it's fun. My own kiddos are on a hybrid right now, but even when they go to remote, they have one day a week where they have social emotional learning and maybe one special. And there's not core classes on Wednesdays, and that helps those teachers in the core areas kind of reload and think, plan for the next bit. And so there's a lot of ways to think about this work, I think, flexibly. And so I think just being able to have conversations with thought partners like the two of you really helps. And so thanks for your contributions, and feel free, those of you viewing this on the website, to access some of our resources in support of your thinking on this important topic.